With the full power of Sukuna finally revealed, not only has he shown to be way stronger than any of us could have predicted, but after reverting to his original Heian era body, Sukuna has somehow actually managed to break the power system. And when I say things like break the power system, I know people are going to go to the comments talking about how Gege doesn't write plot holes or how cursed energy is the best power system since Nen yada yada, but the point I'm really trying to make is just that we know from the 14 chapter fight that was Gojo versus Sukuna that when it comes to adaptability and base knowledge of Jujutsu, Sukuna easily takes the top spot, and it's not even close. But by using a body that has an extra pair of arms and mouths, which in turn grants increased output and efficiency, along with improved hand-to-hand combat, Sukuna's potential as a sorcerer now exceeds what's even considered possible by conventional means. And so, after witnessing Sukuna dismantle through electromagnetic waves with a slash that bisects the world itself, and speed blitzing one of the fastest characters in the series using his physical prowess alone, which, by the way, wasn't even a Sukuna who seemed to be taking things serious, Sukuna being defeated not only seems unlikely, but downright impossible. But nonetheless, with Yuji now joining the battle along with Higuruma, these two are about to surprise us, because Yuji's plan of saving Megami is now officially underway. But before I get into everything, I want to make it clear that if you like JJK content, along with any other manga or anime, to make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Our goal is 5K by the end of the year, and I definitely think we can do that, so thanks in advance and enjoy the video. With Sukuna entering his true form and continuing his battle with Kashimo, Gege immediately makes it clear that what we're up against is absolute perfection. Meaning that if Yuji and Higuruma wants to defeat Sukuna, and I mean to even step on his doorstep as a sorcerer, we're going to need to see a power from Yuji that surpasses not only Kashimo, but Satoru Gojo himself. However, with several chapters of foreshadowing, along with Yuji's appearance looking completely different by the end of the chapter, I think Yuji's about to show the King of Curses that he's not the only one that's built completely different, because as we know from chapter 220, not only is Yuji akin to a cursed item soaked in Sukuna's cursed energy, which likely means that he did end up consuming Sukuna's last finger, it's highly likely that Yuji also consumed the death painting wombs, aka Choso's brothers. And so to give you a bit of an idea of what that means, we firstly have to talk about Yuji as a vessel, because a lot of people seem to overlook that while yes, Yuji doesn't really have a cursed technique on his own, the ability to be a host to cursed objects appears only once every 1,000 years. That means that, in a way, in a span of 1,000 years, you're more likely to see the 6 eyes twice than you are to see Yuji's ability. And look, we know that in chapter 12 that Gojo did say that Yuji's body would learn Sukuna's curse technique, and so whether or not I actually like the idea of Yuji getting Cleave and Dismantle, the fact of the matter is, having Cleave and Dismantle would ultimately help Yuji in more ways than one. For starters, we know that when it comes to combat, Cleave and Dismantle is one of the best, if not the best, curse techniques in the series. Not only does it have an immense destructive power, it also has one of the fastest activation times in the series. More particularly, Cleave itself can actually be adjusted with cursed energy that results in a powerful slash that can one-shot any opponent. And so yeah, Yuji having this technique would be great, but the real benefit to Yuji having Cleave and Dismantle is less about what it can do offensively and more about what it can actually do for him defensively. And that's because, looking back to chapter 235, after activating that hollow purple against Sukuna, we find out that the reason that Gojo survived basically blowing himself up was because of his own cursed energy. We know that Mahoraga was completely destroyed in a blast and Sukuna was left severely injured. And something you guys need to keep in mind, this wasn't just a regular hollow purple, this was a full output hollow purple. And we know that because we see that the first set of incantations used by Gojo was for the blue that was already activated to be restored to its former output. But that second pair of incantations, well, yeah, that was for hollow purple. And so if Gojo can come out of a full output hollow purple and with very negligible damage at that, I would say that to a degree, Yuji should be able to defend against Cleave and Dismantle. And look, I'm not saying that he's not gonna take any damage. I know that Sukuna's upgraded slashes, you know, they pretty much go through anything, but at the end of the day, those slashes are still made from Sukuna's own cursed energy. So just like Gojo's hollow purple went through his infinity, but he was still dealt negligible damage, Sukuna's world cutting slashes shouldn't really be able to cut through Itadori, meaning that if anything else, Yuji's gonna be able to limit this to a hand-to-hand fight. In chapter 215, during Yuji and Maki's fight with Sukuna, Yuji was able to keep up with a fully realized Maki, and whether or not you can argue if Maki was the bigger threat here, I think the point Gege is trying to make is that Yuji is now at a level comparable to fully realized Maki, because, well, first of all, we not only see Yuji being able to literally keep up with Maki, but even before that in chapter 214, we can see that Yuji is clearly a lot stronger than he usually is. And so, given that it's been over a month since that encounter and Yuji's likely trained since then, I think the question is less about whether or not Yuji can actually keep up with Sukuna and more about what he can actually do to defeat Sukuna, which brings me to my next point, which is the death painting wombs and whether or not Yuji has actually consumed them or not. And I'm gonna just say right now, I definitely think he has. If it wasn't already obvious from the short conversation Yuji and Choso had in chapter 220, the end of chapter 238 will leave no room for doubt, because looking at Yuji as he charges towards Sukuna, and it's clear as day that Yuji's body is changed. He not only seemed to have claws like Sukuna, but he seemed to also have blades on his forearms, and it's not really like anything we've seen in the series thus far, so it makes it pretty easy to assume that, yeah, this is the result of Yuji consuming the death painting wombs. And so, using what we learned about Yuji being a vessel throughout the series, let's talk about what this power-up can mean for Yuji, starting with this cursed energy. Getting the basic stuff out the way, I think it's pretty safe to assume that just like Sukuna's finger, consuming the death painting wombs will give Yuji a larger pool of cursed energy, and of course, a cursed technique. We see that the first three death painting wombs, Choso, Eso, and Kichizu, all three of these death painting wombs were born with the cursed technique, with Eso and Kichizu having the rot technique, and Choso having blood manipulation. So if those three are anything to go by, the remaining 6 death painting wombs should have some kind of cursed technique, which, if you see where I'm getting at here, are techniques that Yuji should definitely be able to use. Because similarly to Yuta, as long as Yuji only uses one cursed technique at a time, then theoretically this concept should be very practical. We see how characters like Yuta and King Jaku can use their cursed technique, and due to his nature to be able to copy other people's cursed technique, it pretty much makes them overpowered. Because let's be honest, it's not really about how powerful the technique they copy is, it's about the unmatched versatility that comes along with it. So just like King Jaku, Yuta, and Geto to a certain extent, Yuji will not be subject to the same versatility. And look, we can spend all day speculating on what could be, 6 different curse techniques, from the rot technique to blood manipulation to whatever else it could be. The point is that with Yuji now being able to contend with Sukuna, at least on a level where he doesn't immediately get killed, Yuji now has the leeway he needs to actually use his soul technique and save Megumi. Using Yuki's research on the soul, Yuji was able to further his understanding of it and somehow seemingly create a new technique. We see in chapter 222, exactly 2 chapters after he received Yuki's research, that Yuji has indeed learned something important regarding the soul, because we see that Yuji's in Kusakabe's body and Kusakabe is in Yuji's body. And so obviously the question is, what is this new technique, and more importantly, what are the conditions that Yuji must complete in order to perform it? Because while we know that Yuji is very familiar with the soul because he housed Sukuna, it's really hard to believe that Yuji read a book, read some information, and all of a sudden just learned how to manipulate the soul. So while I won't really give my headcanon account on what this technique is, what I will say is that a technique as powerful as this has to have a lot of conditions. And I don't mean conditions as in he has to clear like very specific steps in order to do it. I just mean in the sense where, Sukuna is going to have to be very weakened, Yuji may need to be extremely focused, things of that nature. But regardless of any conditions or drawbacks or anything like that, this is Yuji's last chance. Given the fact that Yuji has new techniques and abilities, it's likely that Sukuna will want to play with this food for a minute, and so it's going to be important that Yuji takes advantage of that, because I don't see Yuji and Higuruma winning with conventional strength. In fact, the only 2 win conditions I can see, at least for the first round of this fight, is Yuji's soul technique or Higuruma's domain expansion. I do want to say that Higuruma being in this battle is really exciting to see. I mean, this is someone that became comparable to a Great One Sorcerer in about 12 days, and like Hikari, his technique is also domain based, meaning his curse technique started out as a domain expansion. So yeah, when it comes to barriers and domains, Higuruma is up there, and I wouldn't even be surprised if he whipped out something new. We saw during during the Gojo vs Sukuna fight that Higuruma, he was pretty comfortable in understanding what was going on, whereas other characters couldn't even understand. So the only thing I'll say is definitely invest in Higuruma stocks. But alright guys, I think that's about it for me. I want to know what kind of ideas you guys got for Yuji's techniques and what they can actually do against Sukuna. I know some people are going to have some crazy theories, but screw it, just let me know anyway. I do read the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.